To recognize or not to recognize? That is the question, or at least one of the questions of today's Genuine Learning blog. Hello, I'm Peter Zender, and yes, we're diving into the FASB's invitation to comment on intangible assets. These are the assets that may not show up physically, but emotionally, spiritually, and occasionally on our general ledgers, they're very much there. Issued December 19th, 2024, just in time for the holidays, this invitation to comment was basically the FASB's special gift to accountants everywhere. It builds on stakeholder feedback from the 2021 agenda consultation and past standard-setting efforts, both of which made one thing abundantly clear. When it comes to recognizing, measuring, and disclosing intangible assets, opinions are all over the place. Now, the big question is, should the FASB take action? Now, if action were taken, just as a refresher, the scope under the strict definition of intangible assets would include any assets lacking physical substance, excluding financial assets, tangible assets, I think that one goes without saying, and goodwill. Basically, it's that black hole for assets that don't fit anywhere else. And the real complexity a lot of times with these assets, it's in how the intangibles came to be. Some are internally developed, others are acquired through an asset acquisition, or there are those that are bundled into business combinations. But each path comes with its own accounting treatment, and that raises the question, does it really make sense for recognition to depend on how an asset was acquired? Does it make sense for that to be the driver of whether or not an asset is recognized? Those are the things that we're turning over, and we're assessing if the FASB should get involved and provide clarity on or changes. Now, what is happening under current GAAP? Well, the treatment of intangible assets, like I just mentioned, varies based on how those assets were acquired. And here's the breakdown. So for internally developed intangibles, these are generally expensed. This includes most R&D and brand building efforts. There's some exceptions, but you'd have to look to specific guidance like internal use software, which does allow for some capitalization. Now, under business combination, intangibles are recognized at fair value if they meet either the separability criterion, where it can be sold separately. Think of things like trademarks or customer lists, or the contractual legal criterion, where the asset arises from an enforceable right, things like customer contracts or licensing agreements. And then lastly, direct asset acquisitions. These have the lowest threshold for recognition. These intangibles are recognized if they're specifically identifiable, have a determinable useful life, and are not inherent to the entity, meaning they're distinct from the overall identity of the business. So basically not goodwill. So what could change here? What updates could be made to this guidance? Well, we could give internally developed intangibles a fair shot at recognition by lowering the threshold or allowing earlier capitalization. This would bring US GAAP a little bit closer to international standards. For business combinations, it's kind of floating out in the middle of the range. So we could either, provide stricter recognition criteria, or we could loosen things up and get it closer to asset acquisitions. And then for asset acquisitions, the question is, did we go too far? Should recognition be scaled back? What should we do with each of these? Or is it time for a unified recognition model that applies consistently across all of these scenarios? Would that be a better option than making little tweaks to the different aspects here? So if we go the unified model route to improve, or hopefully improve comparability, the real question is, what should that model look like? And do we use those stricter limitations used for internally developed intangibles? Or do we swing all the way over to the other side and recognize more broadly like we do for asset acquisitions? Or we could, again, land somewhere in the middle with business combinations and use that separability and contractual legal criterion, right? Or maybe we don't tweak any of these old models or use any of these old models and we build a new one. We could steal different pieces from each of them, or we could create one that perhaps aligns more closely with international standards like IAS 38. Now, if you have thoughts or preferences on where we should land in this range, whether we should create something new, now is the time to comment and share them. Now, if the potential changes to the recognition models weren't enough to spark your interest in commenting, maybe these last few items will. There's also talk of more standardized guidance on amortization and impairment, especially if we move towards capitalizing more internally developed intangibles. There's some optionality to potentially adopt a phased approach to R&D accounting, similar to IAS 38, where research costs would be expensed during the research phase and development costs would be capitalized during the development phase. This would require more tracking of information to determine whether spending and expenses occurred before or after that transition point from research to development, but it could put more future benefiting intangible assets on the books. And then there's disclosure. So if capitalization becomes more flexible, if recognition is scaled back, or even if just current requirements fall short, there's that question hanging out there. Should we expand disclosures to improve both qualitative and quantitative transparency for financial statement users? Do we need to tweak disclosures as well? But if any of this raised concerns, ideas, or potential changes just did not sit right with you, now is your chance to weigh in. The comment period is open until May 30th, 2025. You can click the link in the blog to submit your feedback directly to the FASB. But thank you so much for tuning in to this edition of the blog. Hopefully you took away some tangible learning points and the info didn't just vanish into the intangible void of nothingness. But get those comments in, be active in the profession, and as always, happy debiting and crediting, everybody. Take care.